Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, February the 22nd. So, still slightly recovering from having nearly a week of just being out of order, as it were, as far as power being out and just not being able to stream for all of last week, except for Friday. So, I thought maybe I would stream on the weekend. Instead, I chose to mostly just try and settle in a little bit more and get back to pre-recording Danganronpa. So I have made 4 or 5 2-hour recordings of Danganronpa, which is getting me nearly to the point where I stopped watching Game Grumps play it. So I am approaching the point where there will be new content for me, which kind of sucks because also in playing in that they said you're halfway through the game. The game just broke the fourth wall to say you're halfway through the game at this point, which I'm like, oh my god, I'm only halfway through this game. I've been playing it for probably 60 to 80 hours already. These visual novels just don't quit, as it were. So what that would have normally done is left me with some extra weekend games that came out on Steam and things like that. But in all actuality, Twitter pretty much broke anyways, so I don't have a lot of new news, and I don't think too much actually happened even to come out on the weekend. Um, so I had thought about streaming on Saturday or Sunday, which is an experiment I should try at some point. Although, inherently, if I did try it and it worked, that would just probably make me somewhat upset, because then um, that would just open up the reality to the fact that um, I would then have to stream on the weekend, and I don't want to inherently stream on the weekends. And so I might as well just not know if that is a thing that would get me more views. I am getting a lot of spam comments lately, which maybe means my videos are getting more engagement and will get put in front of real people's eyes. I don't know. Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if the algorithm specifically just takes channels that spam comments and recommends it to other channels that spam comments and no one else. I did have some free time to run through this first leader character. I didn't follow the story at all. I just skipped it all. But I've completely cleared that with some simple gameplay mechanics, which is great. So now when they add a new chapter for someone here, here, and here, that'll be great too. And I imagine fairly quickly after they add the fourth character there, they are going to try and put in a conclusion that will potentially conclude the story, and also try to do something as far as the fixing the conclusion of Fate's Trigger, which ended fairly abruptly and weirdly. It looks like Entropy's Abyss also is more of a tale around the nine-tailed fox and anthropomorphic animals, which is not something we've seen a ton of, but we did see that in Seeds of Conflict. So that seems to be something that still happens. And I had all the daily quests done, so let's see. Win a ranked match, win 5 ranked matches. Do we want to play a private match? It'll be almost impossible to get a private match. So, Forcecraft to Dragoncraft is our goal. Good. And then we have treasure chests still to get. So we'll try Dragoncraft and we'll jump in here. We've got plenty of news. As for Danganronpa, I finished another chapter, and nothing's really changing there. It's just kind of like more of the same. I moved the skills around, trying to make the rhythm game easier, and even in that effort, it really just made it slightly passable. I wouldn't even say it's bearable. I'd just say I can barely pass the rhythm game that shows up in the class trial and at no other point in Danganronpa. But there was like 3 rhythm games in the last class trial, and I was struggling, frankly, but I've already gotten one game over, so I wouldn't be surprised if you can just kind of game over and game over and game over. Ideally, what I would like is either a skill that is fairly expensive that lets you just completely skip or take no damage whatsoever from the rhythm game. And I would love to equip that, even if that makes the rest of the mini games in the class trial more difficult, because I don't have helpers there, helper skills enabled. Then, which that definitely was the case, is I disabled a couple of helper skills for some of the other mini games, and then those mini games became incredibly more difficult, with leading edge shots needing to be taken with the truth bullets in the minigame. Because, so like the target, let's say it was in the center of this circle, the target would always move, and normally you would shoot maybe slightly ahead of it, and assuming a bullet is almost instantaneously to hit the center of a circle. Now, without the helper things, it's moving like fast enough that you're kind of needing to shoot over here so that it will be where it needs to be when several seconds pass. It's hard. It's definitely hard to talk about Danganronpa without spoiling anything. And I'm not 100% sure that it isn't the case that we will eventually get away from the murder mysteries and just hit into the bigger narrative. And it does feel like there easily could have been a split between the standard murder mystery gameplay mechanics and the actual larger narrative of whatever is really going on in Danganronpa. And I suppose if you were going to make a manga or an anime based on that concept, it might very well have affected that. See, when you think of like Detective Conan, there is this longer narrative in Detective Conan that a high school super genius detective gets poisoned with some kind of pill, and it turns him into a little boy, and he's trying to discover like the secret organization that poisoned him and get his old body back. And he's also trying to maintain or grow his relationship with his girlfriend, who now thinks that he has left the country, and she is instead taking care of, I think, his cousin or something along that line, in the little boy form. But in actuality, with Detective Conan's storytelling, that backstory is barely the smallest of connecting tissue. I think they move that story forward maybe once every 3 or 4 entire seasons of the anime series, and every single episode really is pretty much the same otherwise. It is a very bespoke, very separated murder mystery in Detective Conan, and I like it for that, certainly. And you don't really expect the main story to ever wrap up. If it does wrap up, it'll be because Detective Conan somehow stops being popular after decades of being popular, and or the creators is dying. If they do want to wrap it up, that they'll make a movie about it, and it will be a big cinematic event to wrap up the story. But until that point, there's really not going to be any major changes. They might introduce a new voice actress and a new character to represent a new voice actress or actor. That's about it. Whereas in Danganronpa, to use that in comparison, being a video game, we kind of need the story to be mostly wrapped up by the end of the video game. So the side murder mysteries need to be take up less time as we're going forward, and frankly probably always needed to take up less time. There was one point certainly where we saw the game realized and proved that it had realized that it could just fast travel you to certain areas and jump you into conversations instead of making you walk from one area to another area. There's also several points where one character is voice acted or one character is partially voice acted, where it definitely feels like at the halfway point they started running out of budget for voice acting, which, yeah, the whole game feels like it was designed almost episodically and released in parts, which it's too old of a game for that really have to been the case, particularly since it was a PSP game. So I just have no idea why that would be the case. It feels like they maybe had all the animation done, and then they hired voice actors and just in generally unbalanced the whole game. Interesting. Well, that might work, I suppose. So, yeah. Without spoiling anything, it's hard to talk about Danganronpa, and there's really nothing else for me to talk about. I desperately need to find extra time to kind of settle things and clean the house, and literally clean my house, which I think I'll do mostly after today. Yeah, later today after streaming. And then I need to find extra time to work on my router to get the ad blocking back on and all the settings back the way I want them, because that's kind of annoying. We can kind of see that there's a little bit of a hiccup here without quality of service enabled, but frankly not anywhere as much as the tweaking and all of the messing around that I do tends to actually enact. So there is probably a decent argument to be less aggressive with deep packet inspection, quality of service type protocols. That could have been what caused the old router to burn out, although frankly it just seems like the truth of the matter is it was a case of the game, of the router just kind of burning itself out through use. And very possibly wasn't anything I did, because frankly I was starting to have problems before I made any changes. And it was probably one of those scenarios where something was failing, and instead of trying to just calling it like a surgeon often has to, I tried to triage it and resuscitate dying hardware, as it were. This analogy is not quite the best, but I'm also struggling to finish reading the last 2 trade paperbacks I have of Why the Last Man and Ex Machina, which are about the 4th of 10 trade paperbacks, which puts me in a weird position now, because now that I have other things to do with my time, the right argument, the smart argument, would be to just forget about them and throw them away or give them away and have an unfinished story and an unfinished collection. I'm not sure. I think either Why the Last Man or Ex Machina at this point are particularly good enough comics to really want them on your bookshelf. I can say, however, that both Why the Last Man and Ex Machina, which I think are both written by Brian K. Vaughan, so that there might be some connection there. I will say that I think a couple of those comics are better by far than your standard New 52 Batman comic, which or New 52 Superman, not to single out Batman per se, but just any of the DC comics I had before, all of them pretty much stunk. And in those instances, I got maybe 3 or 4 trade paperbacks in with the New 52 comics before either DC themselves had canceled the series or I had just completely lost interest. And so all of those stories were incomplete for one reason or another before I gave them away. Whereas, like, the Watchman series I still have on my bookshelf, and the Sandman series. I did read the Dead Boy Detective Sandman Presents spin-off story, but that wasn't written by Neil Gaiman, and that was unimpressive. Although, frankly, reading it years after reading the Sandman series is not super useful either. One thing I will say about Ex Machina is that if we'll do a brief talk about old comics, Ex Machina is very much set around George Bush era politics, George Bush Jr., not Sr., and New York politics and 9/11. So there's kind of a ever-growing gap in history and in time between whenever you would read Ex Machina and when it was kind of set and how impactful it would be. It still mostly works for me, but I could easily see if you tried to hand it to, say, a 16, 17, 18-year-old, it would be way too political, and I don't think anyone that age would like it, because Ex Machina is a very, very political comic book, which is almost an interesting thought in itself. But B, it's just so political in that sense that you really wouldn't you just really wouldn't see a lot there to interest you. There's a lot of talking. Both of Vertigo Comics and both in that instance seem to be willing to show nipples and cuss a little bit more than you would see, which you wouldn't see that at all probably in a Marvel or DC superhero comic. But it's not done to any major amount or major effect, really, because like it is a comic book in the end of the day, and certainly with the advent of the internet, you can see a lot more cussing and a lot more nudity at any point you choose. there's a scene in Ex Machina where a character is talking on the phone and it happens to be in a 90 that is mostly see-through, and so you can see her nipples. And in a funny way, that is kind of just natural, as it were. Like, sure, that was the artistic decision of the writers to set the scene that way. The character could have been on the phone talking to another character anywhere, in any scene, or she could have been in the exact same location and exact same scenario, and she could have just been wearing a thicker, not sheer see-through 90. But then also I would say there are sections in particular where they are kind of just pointlessly emphasizing on breasts. And it's not like they're getting hardcore with it, so that they still are mostly going a little simplistic there. Yeah, like full nudity would still be a thing. Y the Last Man, also, if I can do a brief comic review, still I am very uncertain as to whether this is not a story that is designed around just hating women. It could be that it is just a story that happens to that happens to be telling the story that it wants to tell, but it also kind of just feels like it might be designed to like hate on women. There's a lot of I guess inherently when you create a world where there's only one male character, every other bad guy in the story is by de facto going to be a female, and so that might be a corner that they painted themselves into. But there also aren't too many good girl characters in the story, and like the one really good girl in the story dies fairly quickly. But even more than that, as a problem, it does just kind of seem to, almost like Lord of the Flies, propose and create this scenario that just doesn't feel completely true to life. If 50% of all life, if the entire male population of all mammals died, sure, that would be terrible and have major long-running effects. But the way Y the Last Man presents it is that almost instantaneously all of the women are completely helpless and starving to death, and they can't like turn on the electrical grid, and they can't apparently run tractors and farming, and they can't run a government, they can't maintain armies, they can't do anything, which frankly just seems a little silly in my opinion. That I've seen plenty of self-capable women out there that could take charge and lead other women to actually accomplish and run a society, even if they were all affected. The general idea of starvation, if half your population dies, is kind of crazy in the first place. Like, there more than likely are enough rations on any shelf or cans on any shelf to keep people fairly well fed for 6 months to a year, if properly distributed. And so half your population, you double that time. The idea that in what seems like, I don't remember the amount of time it took, but it seemed like 3 months, the idea that they would start to starving after 3 months, that they would have formed entire roving gangs of Amazonian women in 3 months is just kind of ridiculous. That the timeline feels weird there. So yeah, it is very possible that I would end up reading Ex Machina all the way through and Why the Last Man all the way through just to kind of hate it. There definitely were some comic books like that in the DC comic books I read after originally, where I was kind of getting into them and kind of liking it, and then all of a sudden it either just abruptly ends or it ends on kind of a sour note that I was just not really interested in that. Anyways, that is enough, I think, about talking about comics. Let's go through the video game news. We still have plenty of stuff left from Friday. We may very well have a running backlog of games that came out on Steam, although I'm not sure I've even seen a single game that has come out via the What's on Steam Twitter app, because my Twitter has been messed up, and that again feels like just Twitter was messed up, not anything I was doing, because I was trying very hard to disable any trickery there. I also installed a couple of Chrome extensions to try and auto backup and auto restore tabs better than the one I had installed before, because the one I had installed before obviously is not making enough backups, and that is an issue. So Insomniac Games has this tweet, "Welcome home," and this is a character named Drew Murray, who's a game designer. He made games like Sunset Overdrive, Ratchet and Clank, and Resistance. So he's rejoining his friends and former colleagues at Insomniac Games as a principal designer. That takes me to my 7th job title now. So apparently he was working somewhere else and decided to go back to Insomniac Games. Which, in a weird way, you almost never want to see that. As much as you might want Drew Murray in particular to work on a game, you never want to see someone go forward to a new job and then come back to the old job. It's just like there's no going home is the concept that often I say. It's like that does feel like he is pretty much just backtracking on his career, or he couldn't succeed in his new location. And that may very well not be the case, but that's what it feels like for sure.
How's everyone doing tonight?
And that certainly is not much news unless you really know that character, which is a big if.
A glimpse into the future is only
I did change the settings on the minimal scroll bar, and now I realize I changed it for everything, and that's a problem. TechRaptor has an article here. You'll be able to buy Robux stock starting next month. Why you would want to buy stock in a game company like Roblox is questionable, to say the least. It would yeah, I would be fairly cautious on suggesting the idea, or even beginning to suggest the idea that somebody should invest in something like Roblox.
So this is my fate after all.
How did I miss that?
Let's see. Studio Madhead is working with Fall Guys, so Cupman and Mugman skins are going to show up amongst also a costume piece and some emotes for 5 crowns. I don't know how much 5 crowns is as far as what I assume is a premium currency in Fall Guys. I'm not sure that many people are still playing Fall Guys, though, so you do run into that as an issue. Alright, Clash, deal 1 damage to the leader, restore 1 defense to your leader.
Darkness on this plane.
Right.
It won't be long now.
Welcome to the world of endless. How's this? To the depths of the abyss.
This bears further study.
So, yeah. If anything, I would say that the Cuphead game, like Cuphead 2 and the Cuphead DLC, I guess Cuphead 2 hasn't even been announced yet. The Delicious Last Course DLC was delayed, and the thing that I personally, as someone who rage quit and wasn't able to beat all of Cuphead, the thing that gets me back on board to be interested in Cuphead is not their characters showing up in other games, but them introducing a less challenging requirement to get to the final bosses and potentially defeat the final bosses. Because I was able to mostly unlock everything except for the final bosses, which because that was the point where it said you had to have beaten, if not all, I think you have to beat all of the other bosses on normal mode, which is actually by most standards a hard mode, before you can even take on the Mr. Dice Man and the Devil characters, where I would have preferred to frankly been able to have been able to take that on the easy mode. That being said, even at that point, taking on Dice Man would have probably been fairly impossible for me, because there's just a lot of places where parrying and jumping and dashing and the controls in general are not dumbed down well enough or made in such a way to make the game easier. Which, at the end of the day, I can't respect the video game critic who couldn't get past the tutorial. That stuff was easy enough. But I could certainly understand in that one instance if a mainstream video game journalist had come out and said, this game is too far hard for me, I wasn't able to beat the boss. But we didn't hear any of that, which just then brings about the question, do video game journalists beat any games they cover? And the answer we kind of know at this point is no, they don't. They often only get about halfway or a couple hours into a game and then review it. Or if they do make it to the end, they often rush through the game and skip entire sections, for better or worse, which is not what I think most gamers would consider a reasonable way to play a game.
My supremacy surpasses that of dragons!
Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. Watchdogs Legion multiplayer release date has finally been revealed. I didn't even know that it was going to get multiplayer. I've kind of completely ignored and forgotten about it. But yeah, they're apparently putting out multiplayer. It certainly goes back to the idea as to why there are so many random characters that you can control and play as in Watchdog Legion. The name Legion makes a lot of sense if there's multiplayer too. So clearly that was an idea from the beginning of the entire experience. I'm not sure that the other Watchdog games even did have multiplayer, but Watch Dogs is definitely not the game to have multiplayer in it. When is the release date? March 9th, 2021. That took a lot of time to figure out the one thing I wanted to know. Right. 1-1. Right. Well, let's start by evolving this.
Be gone. Verifying access.
And then I guess that means we hit that and put that here. Do I want to automaze Vanguard now? I don't think so. Cappy Games, which makes Grindstone, had an internship, and so they wanted to highlight some of their interns who had worked on things. So we have they made up a website for Jonathan Bandhu, who apparently has worked on several things, which at a certain point as a game designer, if he's got 4 different pictures he can post up here, is he really intern level at that point? Here is a more reasonable highlighting of Chris being a 3D artist and showing off just 3D art. That seems more realistic. But apparently they only had 2 interns. And frankly, for a video game critic, it does become kind of hard to highlight the work of interns that worked for a specific company more than it is to, say, highlight some student that came out of DigiPen who makes a little bit more sense. That they make finished products, as it were, and those finished products are, while they are student projects, they are still video games. Instead of potentially having to go and look at somebody's website, which I guess we could do that.
Let the gems light your way to success. The real battle begins.
Yeah, looking at his website, it definitely looks like a website, but not a particularly good one. As a game designer / producer, this website is missing a lot of modern Flash. In the fact that it's not using a anything. Here we can see the site was built with Wix.com website, so you've got like an advertisement on your personal website. That sucks. You've got some very out of place formatting here, and let's see if we can zoom out a little bit and see if maybe that would fix anything. Nope. And I doubt zooming in would fix anything. Nope. So you just got like dead space all over the place. You've got no copyright information or anything at the bottom. You've got just plug-in things that you would almost certainly assume that this is a WordPress type listing. He's apparently worked on 1 game. So he does seem like he is basically an intern, which is fine to go that route and just be an intern, but then there's
Enemy identified.
How could you?
there's some weirdness, I would say, around the fact that he is claiming to be a game designer slash producer when as an intern, like game designer,
Look at you. You're hurt.
should probably be your focus more. That being said, there are a decent number of like radio producers that seemingly are given the title of producer right out of their internships.
You dare to disturb my domain? My empress. Sleep with the fishes. Sleep with the fishes. The dragon empress. Long live the dragon empress. Long live the
Enemy
dragon empress.
identified.
I could have had one more.
These weapons are for hunting dragons.
So, yeah. If anything, I would say this website is kind of great in the idea of showing that how a game designer in general is not going to just by default be a good web designer or be a good graphic designer, or just be up with the standard as to way websites are even supposed to look. This really does feel like something that somebody in my HTML class many years ago would create as a website, something as a student project just to show that you could program something versus an actual final product. And there definitely are a lot of people out there that have terrible websites anyways, because people just don't care. Which, in all fairness, if you don't care about the quality of your website, by all means, don't care about the quality of your website.
It won't be long now.
Let the waves rock you to welcome home.
Here
All alone in the ocean.
and here. Just constantly trying to eliminate the options. But yeah, there kind of is no point also to criticizing someone's website. So let's move forward. We got a ton of stuff, and me dilly-dallying is not going to help anything. Gamatsu has its a gameplay trailer and screenshots for the game It Takes Two. This was announced and looked slightly interesting, and then was fairly forgotten about. So, like, just in case you don't remember, it's these two, like, yarn couple that are being forced to do kind of platforming challenges and working together as a form of some kind of group therapy. We now see in this trailer real versions of the couple fighting. So we now kind of see that this is a case where either the real world couple actually did get stuck into this weird situation, or this is all just happening in the mind of the little girl. Which, frankly, the game story feels a little less fun when you know that there is a innocent victim involved in a breakup, whereas before it felt like this was going to be two people that were just having a rough patch, and then they were going to go through this weird event, and then they were going to get back together, and they would only suffer as much as they kind of deserved for potentially being being I don't even know what the right word would be. Pains in the butt, or being contrarians. Yeah. Yeah, it feels definitely different when it's two people suffering because it's their own fault versus a third person, innocent child, suffering because of the relationship breaking up. And once you throw in the child, then the trailer that originally showed this looking like it was just going to be a kind of fun comedic experience takes on this whole different feeling.
Allow me to test your worth.
Spread your mighty wings.
Can we do anything?
Delectable. Time to say goodbye. You will not stand in my way.
The possibility I survive this seems
Our leader remains
very low. But yeah, it also it's certainly weird to then remind us of It Takes Two and do the advertisement track when this game probably isn't coming out for quite a while. And I don't know, maybe in 2021 there won't be a lot of competition, so it will make sense to trickle out announcements between the handful of AAA games or AA games or single A games that come out in 2021. But if anything, I think it might just benefit everybody to just kind of chill on the advertisement in general, and I suppose at a certain level there is an issue where a producer's worth is only defined around how much money they put into the advertisement and the actual production and delivery of physical goods. So or pre-development money. And so it may very well be a case that a publisher, I said producer, but I meant publisher. A publisher may just not feel comfortable investing $1 million into the development of a game and then not spending $2 or $3 million in advertisement in the hopes of recovering that $1 million investment plus the advertisement investment.
true warrior of Valhalla.
So publishers may just demand advertisement in the same way that we've seen publishers often demand things get released on their release date, even if the games are horribly unfinished. Double the attack and defense. Well, if I could do that.
Heaven's glorious works.
It's not gonna save me though.
You're on the air.
That and that. TechCraft has an article here. Every unfulfilled promise of Cyberpunk 2077. At this point, this is kind of like beating a dead horse, but they are talking about last gen consoles are the focus, the E3 2018 demo, the Live City NPCs with a handmade routine, more customized 5, and purchasing more customizable V, and a purchasing apartments, missing combat features, the police, weather effects, like I want to say I told you so, really, but in a certain way I did get the feeling in the last 6 months to a year of the way they were advertising Cyberpunk and showing off Cyberpunk, that there seemed to be like nothing really on the offer, and it did feel very much like it was just going to be a fancier Deus Ex in a cyberpunk world, and in the end, I think that's all it kind of is a fancier Deus Ex in a cyberpunk world, although Deus Ex is also in the cyberpunk world. But I could definitely tell the hype was getting insanely high, and some of the visual implied promises from trailers were not really going to be met, or some of the trailers and implied promises really just did not coalesce into something that could have actually been a game. They were snippets and cool scenes, and that's it. Like, it is shocking even now that the story of Cyberpunk 2077 is completely unknown to me, which just tells me that it wasn't interesting enough for people either to be mad at it or to be happy with it. The thing that most people I've heard talk about Cyberpunk 2077 is the vast amount of sex toys in the game, and it's like, all right, you can have that, but if you're putting that all over the place and that's your focus, then you're probably better off just making an adult game. Which at a certain point, that probably would have been a bolder move. After coming off of the effects of The Witcher 3, had they said, no, we're just straight up making an adult-only game. This game is all going to be about sex. This is just a sex game. We're not going to try and wrap it in any higher-minded mentality or anything like that. That would be weird, to say the least, but that would solve the issue with it. I think more than anything.
Settle down, would you?
Yeah. I was never particularly close to a point where I was going to buy Cyberpunk 2077 day one. At this point, I don't think there's a great reason to buy it ever. It may be historically relevant only really in the fact that it was a big AAA game released in 2020. But that very well may be the only relevance it has whatsoever. And for instance, if I was going to say play a AAA game that came out in 1992, but it never never got any sequels and never had any impact, that would just be insane. Is this the 5th turn? Yeah.
Bluest water.
Be gone.
So, yeah.
To make the world blue. Color yourself.
I feel like there's a much better argument, and I am just mostly talking here, not going through the news when I should really just be burning through the news. There's a much better argument to play something like the Metro series, which is lesser played and lesser known, but at least there's a series there, and it has a long-running relevancy. There might honestly be an argument to straight up just playing a adult porn parody of something like Cyberpunk 2077 instead of playing the real game. Or the best argument would definitely be play the next Deus Ex game that I haven't gotten around to playing, which is Mankind Divided, instead. Or go back and play Deus Ex 1 and 2, which are the very old games. And they could definitely have done for a remaster. Moving on though, we have a game on Steam here called Survival Engine, which is just a survival game with low polygons. It's free, English only, so when you have something like that for free, you can kind of see how easy it is to have those kind of elements in your game. Let's see, Gamatsu has an action RPG called Pascal's Wager, the definitive edition coming to PC on March 12th. Currently it's for iOS and Android, so it's a cell phone game. I want to kind of see what it is. Pascal's Wager. I don't immediately remember what Pascal's Wager is. I know it's some kind of like theory or scientific theory or philosophical theory. I kind of want to think that maybe Pascal's Wager is the idea of, well, if you get into heaven, if you believe in a god, and get into hell if you don't, you might as well just believe in a god. That might be the case. Now, if that's what that is, then this game itself seems like it plays into that idea fairly well. This does look like an interesting kind of hack and slash RPG game, but if it is a cell phone game originally, I kind of have to wonder if the level designs are small or the character variations are small. At a certain point, even if this was really, really good, you still probably are just going to get an HD definitive edition of what is an abridged RPG. At a certain point, though, that is that might be ideal, though, because there are definitely instances where I would have appreciated having an abridged RPG to play instead of the usually extremely long-running RPGs. It is, I assume, also not very well known because I've never heard of Pascal's Wager as far as a cell phone game, and if there was a massively interesting looking cell phone game. Here we've got more screenshots on the Steam page. If this was a really well known or really well designed cell phone game, people would have talked about it. It's from a developer that I've never heard of and a publisher I've never heard of. And yeah, it's very zoomed in, which would make sense. You've got almost an upskirt shot on this character, so it might go a little bit lewd, but probably not that much. This might be more of a boss rush mode, or it might feel more like a boss rush mode than a RPG. Guess I can go ahead and just put that on the following list. And let's see. Although at a certain point, there is kind of an argument that it would be nice to find a bunch of hidden gems from cell phone games that are getting ported to Steam. That would be better than just low effort cell phone games being ported to Steam. And if there were actual hidden gems on iOS and Android phone storefronts, that would be a nice reveal too.
Forced abandon me.
Let's play.
Alright,
You're done
here we go.
I walk my own path. Just
Hit
don't.
that.
Oh,
And then this guy is 4, so even if I was to attack with all of those, I would still die. I still have a maximum of 9 cards. TechRaptor has an interesting article. According to a Jagex study, 7% of gamers play while naked. Now, naked in a more British sense often means just in your underwear, where bare naked or buck naked means fully in the nude. I probably wouldn't be. I kind of don't care one way or the other, but playing while you're comfortable, and if you're comfortable naked, sounds like a good idea to me. Let's see. That is also a headline. This report also has other reports, like 49% gamers say they now game more than they used to, based on self-reported games. But yeah. I would personally feel a little awkward to be just bare naked anyways. I feel like it is unusual for a lot of people, until they are fairly old and fairly wise, to get so comfortable with their bodies that they're willing to be fully nude. But there definitely are people out there that are just straight up naturalists / nudists, and they do want to do everything in the nude if they can get away with doing it in the nude. It's hardly like I inherently disagree with that. The 7% may at some point run weirdly because if you're playing like local co-op, which there isn't a lot of local co-op at this point, playing while naked seems a little bit weirder, but maybe not, because frankly, if you're a nudist and your whole family's nudist, it's not that strange to be potentially naked next to somebody in a very non-sexual way. And inherently, naturalists and nudists are all about the idea of embracing the nudist lifestyle in non-sexualized ways. There is a bit of a clash, personally, as someone who is a bit more of a pervert than most. I imagine it would be hard for me to specifically determine when a scenario was going the route of being a sexual scenario versus not. And of course, streamers can't play naked, at least on most sites. Maybe there is a decent amount there. There are definitely a lot of factors there, but mostly it just kind of boils down to comfort. Also, though, frankly, this is a statistic and a survey question that doesn't really prove anything at all, because there's no way for video games to particularly pander to people who like to play games naked versus otherwise. If anything, capitalism would just push people towards wearing gamer clothes and gamer swag, as it were, and so you need more products. There is an interesting argument about, well, if you're not wearing clothes as much, then they're not getting dirty as much, they're not having to wash as much. That's saving the environment, that's saving money, and if that's creating comfort. Generally speaking, I think I might have been happier had I been raised in a household that embraced the naturalist nudist lifestyle earlier. I probably would have been a little less awkward in my awkward teenage years, and more just generally happy with my body and showing my body to other people. I definitely recall that in my early years of youth, I was fairly conservative and ashamed and didn't want to show or be nude around anyone else. Which thankfully I've pretty much gotten completely over that. And I have definitely enjoyed that. The don't giving a F attitude is really, really nice when you're comfortable with your body and you can just say, hey, I want to do this, or I want to go bathe in the sun, or I want to wear this revealing clothing. I don't feel like anybody is particularly benefited from the often religious-based reasons where to be forced to cover up large swaths of your skin. But I can also certainly see somebody stopping at shorts, stopping at a tank top, and feeling comfortable in that level of dress. I have a hard time believing very many people are actually comfortable wearing like a burqa and completely covering themselves up, but a lot of that is nurture, not nature. So I could certainly understand people thinking they feel more comfortable that way. Moving on though, since that's basically a pointless conversation, Valheim has topped 500,000 concurrent players on Steam in under 3 weeks, which ironically, that's also the number of people that we have just passed as far as who died of COVID in the United States. So, yeah. For every person playing Valheim, there's a dead person. Which that's an unfair comparison by me. Otherwise, this new story just really points out that Valheim is working, is succeeding fairly well, which good for it. One damage to 2 random characters. And then that. Tickraptor has a review for the Shadow U, which looks like a bad, although not terribly animated Western visual novel. Yeah, you've got like a father character with blue hair and a son character with blue hair, and they're in very badly chibi animation styles. Then you have a white-haired character. Then you have some character change to some kind of like magical talisman laden poles. They gave it a 3.0. The Shadow U tries to get on by a shallow imitation. It tries to get by on shallow imitation and angry teenage energy with all the elegance and skill of a terrible fanfic. Let's see. Guess we want this. This is a storm. The pros are decent character designs and not terrible sound direction, which mentioning sound direction on something that looks like a visual novel is pretty odd. The cons are awful main characters, horrible pacing, level design and structure, trite, pretentious narrative. What's interesting here is this is a character that I don't recognize from this picture. But this isn't the same person who's covering what is just an RPG Maker visual novel. And what this probably, once again, highlights is that as Tickraptor is trying to scale up more and more, they are struggling to find games, particularly right now. Let's see. Do that. And then do that. And then go ahead and just evolve that. So it puts another character on the field. Yeah. If anything, I think what happened here is that TechRaptor in particular scaled up very highly to try and anticipate a lot of games coming out before the pandemic, and now they have just a ton of people that they're going to have to throw at some of the worst Steam games so that they have anything to do just to keep them paid. Unless they're going to start doing retrospectives, which, I mean, certainly that would be my case too, is if I was trying just to, if I was just trying to play new games, I would definitely be in a problem situation right now. Let's see. Oh.
No dragon can take my prey.
TechRaptor has an article here. RetroArch Open Hardware is the team's attempt at a RetroArch console. And apparently this is specifically focused around playing Nintendo 64 consoles. You can see these are 3D printed cases with a circuit board in them. There's an interesting argument here specifically for the Nintendo 64 hardware that that does seem like it would make more sense. So this is kind of a proof of concept, part of the open hardware project, which there may be multiple open hardware projects. Like, it seems like what this really does, though, is it's just dumping and reading the Nintendo 64 device as a mass storage volume device. Which that's not going to be particularly that's not particularly that helpful. It almost makes an assumption that I think is a false assumption that the Nintendo 64 ROMs out there haven't all been dumped already. The idea that you would need this device is kind of limited unless it was going to have like an FPGA or specific circuitry that let Nintendo 64 games in particular run smoother. Although arguably, if you're having to plug it into a laptop with USB-C, if you're having to plug it into a laptop with USB-C like this, then the laptop probably is already powerful enough to run any ROM of a Nintendo 64 game anyways. So this is only potentially useful if you wanted to pull out the save game of your specific Nintendo 64. If you don't care about your save games, you're way better off not trying to get one of these devices once they're available, if they ever are available, which they probably won't be, and instead just getting ROMs through some other source and pulling things off that way and just playing the game that way. Where this idea, I think, falls, and step 2 of this really would be helpful, is if this device did have some kind of circuitry in it to emulate the Nintendo 64 console better, then you could plug this device into a Raspberry Pi. That's where it would become helpful. And at a certain level, if this device is either designed specifically well enough to run Nintendo 64 games perfectly, and emulate them on Raspberry Pis. You probably could put some other code into it and some other circuitry to start hitting things like full Dreamcast emulation or PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 or even PlayStation 3 support. At a certain point though, you might have to make multiple versions of something like that, and there might be multiple plug and play things. Yeah, I don't know if I plan on getting too many more Raspberry Pis, but there is a Raspberry Pi project I was thinking about where just making a karaoke machine might be an interesting idea. Although a karaoke machine versus a karaoke game are very different things. One would just play the music and put the words on the screen, where a karaoke game would actually try and rate how well you sung. And but getting a real karaoke machine still is slightly as expensive, if not more expensive, than getting a Raspberry Pi. Although at a certain level, if you have to have two microphones to amplify the voice and sing the karaoke, then and a monitor and all of that, a modern karaoke machine might be slightly cheaper once you have to get all those components together, or it might be in a more streamlined, slim package. Of course, you can definitely get toy karaoke machines, and they work fairly well. Because at a certain point, also, if you're going to do karaoke, you almost want wireless microphones, and that's going to be fairly expensive. But you would want to be able to jump around and hold the microphone in your hand. And with a wire, that just confuses the whole issue. Much like how the Nintendo 64 ROM dumper, which is pretty much all it is, confuses the issue. If anything, I would say RetroArch should probably just focus on the software, but maybe at this point they have hit the maximum that they can really do with the software. That very well may be the case. 4 fairies and give them rush. Tech Raptor has an article here. Mike Bithell, I guess that's Bithell, talks about his dream Star Trek game. This is a interview with somebody. I don't know who Mike Bithell is. A veteran of the indie game video game scene. He made Thomas Was Alone, which, for as ugly as this game looks, it seems to be way more popular. Or he is just really, really good at advertising his own stuff. Right, well, this, and then evolve. Then hit that. But yeah, you can check out that article if you're interested. Here we have a game on Steam called Battleship Apollo. Looks like a top-down space shooting game. It's early access and free to play with in-app purchases. Yeah, so I don't think that would be anything I specifically would be interested in. Yeah, I didn't deal with the issue specifically of tabs suspending on their own. So I'm still kind of in a weird position there, where I don't know why tabs are specifically suspending when they shouldn't be.
For you.
Ow! You're strong.
Says use the native tab discard API. Guess we gotta test that. So we'll try the native tab API, even though we hadn't been using that anyways. If anything, I think it's just Chrome is suspending tabs now, which maybe the other plugin I had simply avoided that somehow. So yeah, more problems, more things to work on, as always. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Netmarble US to acquire NBA All-Stars developer Kung Fu Factory. Okay. Yeah, so many of these articles, it really does just kind of end in okay. A PS5 version of Cloudpunk has been listed at Cultura.
Small fry.
It's currently out for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Here we can see the logo, but I really have no idea what Cloudpunk is. Let's see. Let's see. YouTube has a blog that says investing to empower the YouTube experience for the next generation of video, which I guess maybe they're gonna try and introduce chapters as they pull down instead of focusing on chat as much. You'll introduce a new add-on package with 4K streaming, offline viewing, and unlimited concurrent streams at home for YouTube TV, which nobody really cares. Apparently, music is going to be more focused on, focusing more for children. These are very generalized. YouTube Shorts is going to be more focused on. They definitely are trying to get play follow the leader with TikTok. I'm just scrolling here, of course. Helping creators build businesses. Yeah, sure. Shopping for the next generation. And so maybe they're going to try and start putting more specific ads. You're just forever in this weird position where you can't really trust YouTube, and anything they say does feel like it is just going to be something that is going to make YouTube worse. YouTube hasn't had any real breakout hits lately, and so it becomes very, very hard to put any trust that they've got any new ideas that would be particularly good. And people don't tend to like things or want things until you show them and prove to them that what you're offering is good. Me particularly, I didn't start using Facebook until someone basically dragged me kicking and screaming to use Facebook, and that was at that point back when Facebook had a decent chance of being something good. Now, not so much. Twitter can be incredibly awful if you don't heavily curate who you're following. And like Discord. I thought people were going to get into Discord, and then I really didn't use it much. Pretty much the problem is all of these new services and any new website offering anything new is just cutting into my time for playing video games, which is the one thing I actually do want to do. So I don't want new distractions.
Welcome home.
LibRetro has this low-res NX, a new fantasy console core, which I wanted to look at. It seems to be mostly around the idea of, well, this is like programming. It seems to be mostly around the idea of showing old games. Which there are a decent number of these like experimental cores that kind of don't matter. Like they don't emulate anything anybody really cares about. Nobody's made or ported any games to something like this. It's unlikely that it would be high priority to port this into, say, the RetroPie collection of cores that they support and can handle, even though the RetroPie as hardware could probably handle the core just fine. And at a certain level, if you start playing around with a bunch of cores in the in RetroPie or RetroArch, you're playing with software more than you're playing with video games, and that is only really interesting to programmers or technologically minded people. It's not interesting to somebody that just wants to play a game. I think RetroArch and LibRetro do need to be careful to balance between a it just works mentality for the average person and you can delve really deep into the weeds if you want to mentality that might be more appreciated by
This ain't ideal, is it? Be gone.
by a lot of the more nerdy people.
Mean son of a gun, ain't ya?
See, next we have on Steam here a game called Pixel Puzzles, Illustrations, and Anime. And I kind of have to wonder if this art is properly licensed, because this does seem like it is a weird collection of images, a lot of which strike me as something I may have seen somewhere else, or they're inspired by other scenes. Either that or whoever drew these art pieces is just really, really smart, or really, really good at a very wide variety of images, and I just kind of can't believe this. This is too many different styles and two different themes. You can see here what they're trying to do is charge you $46 in DLC for different puzzles. And this game is coming soon. Which, do you need a coming soon for a puzzle game? No. Big news. Diablo 2 Resurrected has been announced for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. It's due out 2021 with cross progression. I don't think there was any cross play ever for Diablo 2, so them doing a remastered of Diablo 2 probably couldn't put that in there. Still trying to get a Forest Craft or a Dragon Craft victory. We could switch over to the other kinds of decks if we got bored with it enough. Let's see. So it's a remake of Diablo 2 and the Lord of Destruction expansion. They will be able to switch between the new graphics and the original graphics with the touch of button. Now, the question here more than anything is, will it have controller support? Because if it doesn't have controller support, well, then you're just playing Diablo 2 the way you pretty much would have played Diablo 2 originally. It wasn't until Diablo 3 that they had integrated controller support.
Time for me to prove myself.
Prepare for defeat.
It's hard to frankly justify ignoring the sins of Activision Blizzard to go back and play Diablo 2, particularly when you know that a video game critic in my position really has nothing to say as far as Diablo 2. You can easily, assuming that they port it well, you can easily assume that it will be the exact same experience with just better graphics of what you played last time you played Diablo 2 when it maybe first came out. And if you have nostalgia for that and want to play that, then fine. This is pretty much the experience. It's going to be a lot of clicking to the point where you might get arthritis in your fingers. And that's it. Like the graphics are going to only be can really only be touched up so much, and the hero classes and all of that are not going to really change that much. So you're probably only going to want to play as one character unless you just get super obsessed with Diablo. Now see, if this was on the Switch and it has controller support, then you've got that portability aspect. But if you're still just playing this on PC, boy, you're going to miss out on a lot of other games if you are just playing Diablo. We have changed quite a lot as far as a video gaming community since the days of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. And while there is an argument just for completeness sake for me to speedrun through Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, apparently it's going to support Dolby 7.1 surround sound. That might be slightly helpful. I can't help but feel like there's any real reason to get deep into that game. If anything, you can right now watch my coverage of Torchlight, and you have a controller version in Torchlight 1 and Torchlight 2 of a game that is basically like Diablo, without perhaps the demonic elements. So I guess if you want the demonic story, the teasers and trailers for the Diablo series has always been very story forward, when in actuality the story is fairly light. And I feel like even for Diablo 4, that is still very much what they're doing. There is kind of a famous story where the ending or the last cutscene of Diablo 2 was used as a trailer, and the creators of the game of Diablo 2 had no idea how it was supposed to connect to their gameplay at all, and so they just kind of crammed it in. I wouldn't be surprised if that is pretty much exactly how Diablo 4 is also being made, where the story and cutscenes will be just crammed into a standard Diablo experience. Plus, in all fairness, Diablo 3 really didn't add a lot to the game. There's really not a lot more to add to the game. You can just have only so many new classes unless you can create new classes or go outside the realm of dark fantasy world. You can't have a cyborg, you can't have a robot, you can't have anything other than kind of like rogues, thieves, mages, paladins, the standard Dungeons and Dragons things. If you introduced cross classes where you were half a rogue and half a paladin, okay, that would be something that maybe changes things a little bit. Or if you merge the skills, or if you have it where any character can have any skill from any class, maybe that's something that probably speeds up the game a lot, instead of making people potentially play multiple times through. But yeah. As far as
Forest be at peace.
items, like you could potentially have 10 rings instead of 2 rings. You could potentially have two necklaces instead of 1 necklaces, or you could have bracers instead of just entire armor. So you could have like bracers and then shoulder armor and helmets, and maybe you could have a headband on top of a helmet. You might be able to have like break up the armor so you're getting more items, but I don't think that makes the game any more interesting if there's just more variety of things being dropped. In a funny way, Borderlands has so incredibly topped the idea of item drops that if Diablo 4 really doubled down and focused on just different types of weapons with different types of skills and abilities like Borderlands did, that probably would be more interesting. Borderlands also tops Diablo in the fact that it is a much more fast-paced, quicker experience. I wouldn't want to see either Borderlands or Diablo disappear from history, but there are definitely a lot of lessons, particularly for a Western audience that doesn't want to spend as much time as they used to, that Diablo and Activision Blizzard have not really been able to adopt. In particular, I don't know if they can adopt too much without so drastically changing the feel of Diablo, which is kind of painted into a corner. Yeah, I'm scrolling over here, and with the exception of them saying that you can switch between the game's new graphics and original graphics on the fly with the press of buttons, and we know, I guess, that it is coming to consoles. There's no guarantee that there will be controller support on PC, but it would, I suppose, be fairly silly for it to not have controller support.
Help
And
me, fairies.
meanwhile, at BlizzCon, while they're focusing on Diablo 2 Remastered, which should have probably come out 10 years ago, not 20-year anniversary, they are pretty much just delaying Diablo 4. So for Diablo, they had the Rogue reveal trailer and screenshots, which, yeah, this is the trailer in particular that makes me think that they're trying to go more story forward, where this priest is hiring a rogue to kill people and collect their ears. They're highlighting just very high level graphics in this trailer, when in reality you're going to see the character like this for the vast majority of the time, and you can see pretty much it's still just Diablo with better graphics and path making, and not even a lot of people. Diablo had kind of been known for having larger groups of enemies than 3 or 4, so we would kind of want to see those numbers go up. It does seem like there's maybe a little bit more variety. This is a decent number of people, and now we're starting to see larger groups. It also feels like Diablo 4 is just going to have to go into further and further different places to find different kinds of monsters to fight. You can see all the ears of people she's killed. So there is
Help me, fairies.
definitely some concern there as far as
Let's play. Ow! Oh, come on!
okay, well, we're gonna die. Not careful here.
You're done for. So sparkly.
There is a chance that Diablo 4 may very well just not feel like Diablo either.
Let's play. Ow! Stay away.
This is, hope, gonna work.
Oh, come on!
Nope, not quite. As much as had liked to for it to have worked.
This is my home.
I wouldn't be surprised if Diablo 4 has between 4 and 6 characters, whereas a release of Diablo 4 on day one probably should have the maximum number of character classes as are ever going to exist.
Suck you dry.
I don't think in modern times somebody wants to go back a year or two later to play Diablo 4 and as some other character, like a ninja character for instance, let's say that, gets added 2 years down the line. I'm not sure how many people want to do that. And while cross progression between the same games in the Diablo 2 remake is nice, at certain points you almost want progression in some level between each generation of game. I would have probably been fairly happy if I could have taken some of the weapons or some of the XP or some of the gold, anything at all, and converted it to the second game, and thus the hours and work I put into Diablo 1 were rewarded in Diablo 2. And that does kind of highlight where Activision Blizzard's in a bit of a pickle, in that they just don't make enough games fast enough for it to really make sense to only play Activision Blizzard games, and that's kind of what they would like you to do, is only play Activision Blizzard games ever.
No regrets.
Let's see, well, guess we hit this, then we play this.
Hey, let's go. Come on!
And then can't evolve. So we'll end the turn there. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Conan Exiles Update 2.3 brings big changes to Siptah. You might have to move your home. I think part of the things is that they're going to introduce NPC run like communities. The funny thing with Conan Exiles is every time I see it, I feel like, oh, eventually this game might be something of interest. But by the time it is something of interest, I think nobody will be interested in playing it. I think even now, there's no legitimate reason to be playing Conan Exiles, let alone the fact that it was released in early access 2 or 3 years ago. Moving on, TechRaptor has a Valheim roadmap. Details are revealed by Iron Gate. So, building, bosses, and cooking. New Valheim biomes could prove tricky. Let's see, here we have a game on Steam called Endless Furry Clicker. Just to highlight that garbage games still are coming out on Steam for 59 cents. I am somewhat attempting to avoid talking about / covering these kinds of games, though.
Leave this to me, fairy friends. I'll take care of them.
That,
Ouch! That
and then I have 9. 1. Save ourselves that one, and that. I'm about to hit a wall to where we start hitting all the old games. TechRaptor has an article here, Come One, Come All to the Amazing American Circus. This is supposed to be A charming mix between Darkest Dungeon and Slay the Spire. Which, okay. If it is really just taking place in a circus, though, not sure I really want to play a game where you're just fighting circus people versus circus people. That seems kind of silly. It's a Kickstarter game, which I like this image, and this kind of old style animation style would be interesting. There's quite a few old animation styles of the West of America that have long since been forgotten, and nobody even tries to emulate them or find a good place where they could be used. TechRaptor has an article here. Rogue Legacy 2 update Arcane Hollows goes live. I still feel like it's probably a mistake that Rogue Legacy 2 is updating its content in early access as it is. I feel like all the people who would be interested in Rogue Legacy 2 are probably already playing it, and then by the time somebody wants a non-early access experience, everything will have died out as far as hype.
I'll take care of them. Your
There we go.
strength is formidable.
Yeah, we have a game on Steam called Flatline, which looks like it's an infinite runner. It's a Digipin student project. It's free. Yeah, there's clearly some effort was put into doing some like 3D modeling here and some game development while not having real resources or time. I can put this on the wish list since it's a student project. I like to highlight student projects.
I did it! I won!
That guy took forever, but I did finally get a victory after him. And we just need one more Forestcraft victory, and that would leave me with just getting regular victories on anything, and I can just be more varied on my choices. See, next we have a game on Steam here called False Myth, which is tagged with nudity, so maybe I shouldn't show it until I make sure everything is YouTube family friendly. Yeah, it looks like all the screenshots are fine. You can see some very blurry, pixely images, and this is like an RPG game that seems like it was designed to be on a Game Boy or game or Nintendo DS, probably closer than that. You can see it's mixed already. $22.49, English, Japanese, Chinese. Do we know the publisher? Kagura Games. Let's see, what does Kagura Games publish? A lot of adult games games that have adult patches to them. Yeah. I don't know if any of those games are ever well received. Because, yeah, what is the point really of... Well, a lot of their games actually are coming up mostly positive. At a certain level, there's just no helping it. There are suckers out there that are willing to buy bad games just with the promise of nudity, and they will be satisfied with that. Is that an audience that needs a video game critic? Not really. They know what they want, and good on them for being honest and realizing that they know what they want and not really running into a problem as far as needing consumer advice, because clearly they have more money than they have sense. So that audience is just an audience that really can't be assisted with as far as video game criticism. Now, there is an audience of people who do want to play good games that sometimes have adult content in it, or games that are full of adult content but they're also good. That is the picky adult video gamer, and certainly depending on how much YouTube lets me show, a video game critic could be helpful there. But if you are just an unpicky consumer who will buy anything and everything and don't care if it's quality or not, regardless of whether it has adult content or not, that's pretty much, critics really aren't for you. And there's certainly a lot of people that are like that with TV and movies in particular. Is they'll just go to a movie just because whatever. They're not going to go in there with a critical eye or care if it is just a terrible experience, because they're going to have fun regardless. And I guess good on them for that. Moving on, we have Gamatsu here. The Princess Connect Festival for 2021 online apparently has been announced. I think Princess Connect must be one of these multiple media game series. Probably a cell phone game with gacha elements, if I was to guess. I don't inherently recognize these characters. I've definitely seen them before, but and all of this is online now, so there's just like 2 videos here. One that is about 7 hours long, and it's just people sitting on stages talking to each other. If anything, you can kind of see how in this presentations, that's not really 2 meters apart, which is the recommended distance, and we're not seeing any like green screening effects that say there might be a physical barrier between them. And see, this person is definitely sitting right next to us. We're also seeing no real mask being used, so you can kind of see that the Japanese, they think they're immune. I would suspect they probably think it's just foreigners that have COVID. That or, well, here you have them sitting closer together, and then they have glass, so that they're trying to be somewhat helpful. And here you can see it. Some people must have complained on the first day, and then by the second day, they put up barriers. So that, if anything, that's a kind of great example of don't just generalize. There definitely are Asian people out there that who for many years have been kind of used to people wearing masks that still are not going to just immediately jump on board with the whole COVID precautions. And that in part might be just a case of, if you're watching CNN is going to highlight people in America not wearing masks. They're not going to go out of their way to find people outside of other countries. I almost certainly there are Middle Eastern countries that absolutely don't even believe COVID exists and would refuse to wear masks. I mean, there's Middle Eastern countries that absolutely still are not using toilet paper and washing their hands. So obviously there's going to be some of that.
This city is my. Let's speed things up. Too slow. No one gets past me. This is our way out.
Moving on, we have Open Critic has an article here, and Ubisoft's Mythic Quest TV series is going to return for season 2 in May. Mythic Quest feels like it is a show that nobody's watching, and in a weird thing, it was like an Apple Plus thing, so I didn't see it because I don't have Apple Plus for sure. I'm not sure Apple Plus is going anywhere. I didn't know Ubisoft had been involved in that, but it's not unheard of for Ubisoft to try and branch out into other media. Ubisoft's certainly in trouble, so you would have thought that they would fairly quickly cancel that project if it was costing them too much, but It may be Ubisoft's project that is being mostly funded by Apple Plus and Apple.
Son
So
of a gun, ain't ya?
they may be doing just fine in that scenario. There's a few TV shows out there that are around gamers and or around game developers. None of them really seem like they are particularly well done. If anything, I think it would make more sense to try to just have a good TV show, kind of like Friends, where a group of friends happen to just be working on a video game. Even anime, there aren't that many instances where people are game developers. There's an anime where there's a group of girls that become animators, and they're working together to make a animation inside the animation episode TV series.
As my guitar gently beats. Whoa, bud, cut the rough stuff.
Inherently, I think you run into the problem of gamers play video games, they don't watch TV. Not religiously, not with any consistency. You probably run into somewhat of the same issue with like wrestling fans, where a lot of wrestling fans that watch WWE probably don't play the wrestling games because they just watch WWE. It makes much more sense to do what like Netflix does, where they take something like Castlevania and they just make a TV show of the linear story and ignore the video game aspect completely. Netflix has been able to do that moderately successfully for a few things. We've got to play something. So I think this is probably the thing to play.
Oh, no, you don't.
Here we have a game on Steam called Super Plexus, which looks like it's a 4-player match 4, match 3 Tetris type game. It's early access, $5.99. I don't know why these would be early access, and I don't know why it needs a third-party account. $5.99 doesn't seem incredibly expensive, but I'm also not seeing any major indication that this game goes anywhere. It may just be Tetris, and there'd be no reason for me to play that. Here we have one called Godot that looks like it's a Chinese puzzle game, single screen Unity puzzle game, if I was to guess. $1.79, English, Chinese, nothing there. So we can start to really burn through the news for the next 30 or 40 minutes. Let's see, here we have a game called Quick Race, which is obviously a polygon racing game. It's not impressive. $1.79 English. Here we have Infinite versus Open Beta. This looks like a 2D fighting game. Which, okay. It looks interesting enough to start with.
Don't underestimate
An open beta end user license agreement almost seems reasonable. Although, if I'm going to do anything, I should just go to this game that's not out yet and put it on the follow list and keep an eye out. It's kind of hard to justify, though, potentially playing a game, a fighting game, that's a new series. Also, these screenshots seem to really imply that there's at most 2 or 3 characters. And while they may be advertising the fighting technology and the netcode heavily here if the game itself has uninteresting characters and just doesn't get a fandom. It is very, very silly to play something like Infinite Versus then. Here we have isometric nonogram, which would just be like 3D nonograms. A single screen Unity game. That being said, I don't think I've ever seen this before, so there might be an argument to putting this on the fall list. It's only $1.99. It's English only. How many puzzles does it say it has? No number. Alright, well then that just falls down to if it gets enough reviews to be relevant and if the reviews are positive. This is another one of those single screen Unity games where I might want to show it off, but then in all reality I may not be very interested in playing it for very long, which often is the case.
Do you know about Star's power? Sparkly stars!
I got this article linked to me. Cameo apparently paid out $75 million to creators in 2020. Arguably, the large, almost all of that, I assume, went to celebrities or semi-celebrities. You're talking like Brett Favre, Snoop Dogg, Gilbert Godfrey, the Bachelor host Chris Harrison, Cale Baskin, the Tiger King. Cameo is very much a closed selection of people, so celebrities or new celebrities need not people trying to be celebrities or new media people really need not apply. And I imagine there's some novelty that's going to fairly wear off as far as Cameo very quickly. It's not really a service that can grow that much. Yeah, I think Cameo probably is best compared to somebody who goes to events and tries to get photos signed, and waits in line to get books signed or photos signed and things like that. That is the smallest percentage of fandom there. Most people would not bother to do that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called The Legend of Karl, which looks like it's a platformer hack and slash game. Looks like a real game, which these days, anytime we see something that even slightly looks like a game, gets me a little bit excited. It's apparently free to play, single player, in early access. So, put you in this kind of weird position where I feel like this game may never actually be in a finished state. It's the only game from this developer who's self-publishing. It looks good, so I can put it on the fall list, but it needs to get out of early access and needs to kind of prove that there is more there.
No matter what, I'll shine.
That and that, and evolve that.
Come forth. Shine, dear world. I love the feel of the earth.
Didn't attack fast enough. Darn it. Here we have a game called Sly Dungeon, which looks like it's just a frustration platforming game that's not visually interesting for $4.99. Bunch of languages. Here we have a game called Good Night Night. Sneak in slash RPG. game. Well, it's got a lot of visuals to it, while kind of being an 8-bit experience. I almost wonder if the idea is that the knight himself has what is it? Narcolepsy? Narcolepsy? Yeah, narcolepsy. And he falls asleep at random times. That really wouldn't be that interesting, though. Well, it's early access. It's $11.99. It has some achievements that are somewhat suspect. It's English only. Put it on the follow list. There might be enough of a game there. It might be kind of nothing. Deal 1 damage. Spell boost, everything else. Put that. And then deal, let's see, 2 damage there, I guess. No, I should have done teal damage there, and that would have worked better.
Love the feel of the earth. You're me.
Next, we have a game called Hellish Court, which looks like it is a fairly nicely visually designed sword fighting game with what seems like a collection of different types of somewhat famous looking sword fighter archetypes. Overwhelmingly positive. Early access 1444. Seems to be single player. The problem here with something like this is it is going to be pretty much just a sword fighting simulator. And some of them seem like they're doing a duel, but then you cut off the head of a character, so it doesn't seem like it's proper dueling. If you look here, there's like 3 flags. So 3 strikes or 3 draws of blood, which that's quite a lot in a duel. I'll put it on the follow list now, I guess. There's no problem in keeping an eye on that. That's the kind of game that might establish a future in which we see better sword play in games. Maybe. Maybe not.
This is your fate.
Let's go ahead.
You don't stand a chance.
Spell boost.
A revelation. Death draws near.
Kill that. Like that. Here we have a game called Wild West Crops, which looks like it's a kind of arcadey climbing shooting game. Side-scrolling shooter.
My time has come.
With this art style, there might be an argument that this might be easy enough for me that I might be interested in it. It seems a little too cutesy for my tastes, but I really wouldn't let that stop me. The actual gameplay in the video seems to be a lot of jumping and shooting, so you must take damage fairly quickly and easily. And you're shooting crops and you're throwing Molotov cocktails of milk. $3.99, English, Portuguese, Brazil. I guess what you do here is you put this on the follow list and we'll just see what other people have to say, since I can't directly from the information I have go any further with that. Well, let's Spell boosting all the cards in my decks 9 times may have not been that useful. Here we have one called Shape Neon Chaos, which it is just a barf of neon colors. It's a top-down twin-stick shooter for 59 cents, English only. That's easy enough to dismiss. Here we have a game called Nebulu, which this is just a looks like VR Infinite Runner, where you have to shift levels. $6.99 is a little cheap for VR. English full audio it claims. Nothing there to put that on the fall list. Next we have a game called Ragdoll, which clearly is just an asset flip physics simulator. Early access for $8.99, English, Chinese, and Russian. So you got the trinity of scam nations there, including America. Oh, man. Is that a key phrase I want to start using? I don't think so. Scam nations is a little too aggressive. Let's see. Next we have Mediterranean Assault 1943. This looks like this might be a cell phone version of a military first-person shooter. There's way too much of the heads-up display covering up the scenery, and far too few people, and far too few variety of the locations.
This one's for my family.
It's early access, $18.99, English only. I think that's easy enough to skip. Next we have a game called Gym Wizard Tactics, which looks like it's a hex grid based strategy game. Is there anything special here? The irony certainly would come down to if it turned out that I really somehow loved hex grid style games and I've just never given them a decent chance. This is $13.49, English only. I guess I'll put it on the follow list. But yeah, I guess at some point I need to play something that is a hex grid strategy game that's really well received and see if that's a style of game that I really could be interested in playing. Here we have something called FW Sim, Fireworks Display Simulator, which, yeah, that's not a game. $22.49, bunch of languages, early access, just all the highlights of what a garbage game would be. Here we've got a game all in Asian characters, which looks like it's just probably a Chinese RPG Maker type game. English is not supported. Chinese $5.39. Some of these graphics don't look terrible, but yeah, there's really nothing further you can do if they don't support English. Yeah, we have a game called Block Sumo, which probably is also looks like a troll game, if anything. It kind of feels like it's a Western troll game. English not supported, $2.39, Chinese only. Interesting. We haven't seen a lot of Chinese troll games so far, but at any point, I suppose that could change.
My supremacy surpasses that of dragons!
Can we evolve?
Welcome
Nope.
home.
See, next we have Neon vs. Defenders, which is a Neon tower defense game, although I will give it some props in that it is at least thinking slightly 3D in its tower defense level design. $14.99, English and French. Still too much neon, still too much tower defense. Next we have Chinese Mother-in-Law, which looks like it's just an RPG Maker game of no importance. $34.99 in Chinese. That is extremely expensive for a Chinese game. Yeah, I don't even know what they would be thinking in that case. That seems fairly insane. Come on, hit this. Hit that. And then go ahead and just play that.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Welcome
And
home.
hit that. Let's see. Next we have a game called Crazy Defense Heroes, which is a tower defense game. Visually polished kind of nicely, but too much on the screen. Feels like a game that definitely is designed for PC or tablet versus a cell phone game ported to Steam, because it's just so zoomed out, but maybe not zoomed out enough for a tower defense. You can see it's mixed reviewed already. Early access, free to play, bunch of languages. Interesting that you'd have a tower defense game that's free to play. It does also seem to have collectible card game elements in it, which is an interesting experiment to say the least, but not one I feel like I need to experience.
Burning flames will freeze.
And so now
Bop and roll.
do that,
Tough crowd.
and then that,
You won't even think about it, Trumbull.
and
Welcome home.
that. Next we have a game called Starlight Eye of the Storm, which apparently is a bullet hell top-down shooter.
Go with the wind.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything particularly interesting there. Early access, $8.99 English only. Here we have something called Dekabristov Street, which is a walking simulator. Clearly an asset flip walking simulator. $1.99 English only. I don't know what else to say. Here we have a shoot 'em up game called Flying Angel, which looks like a more traditional shoot 'em up game, but still not particularly impressive. It's early access, $3.59, bunch of languages. Again, not really the type of game that needs to be in early access. Like there needs to be some major limitations on what kind of categories and what kind of games can be in early access on Steam. Otherwise, we're going to continuously have games that obviously should be finished products from day one that they're shown using early access as nothing more than a protection against criticism.
Freeze.
Which, if anything, I guess this makes a very interesting argument that something that should be taught in schools all around the world is the ability to take criticism. That being said, I'm not sure that teachers overall, on average, can take criticism from either their students or their bosses / the parents. They often may try to teach people to give constructive criticism, but even that I imagine they do very poorly. But actually taking it and being a self-actuated, confident person is the kind of therapy I think a lot of people could benefit from. Part of the problem, certainly, I think, with the idea of teachers teaching students to accept criticism or take criticism is that one very valid response, and often, in my opinion, the correct response to a lot of criticism is just the standard FU, because there is definitely a lot of invalid criticism or criticism that may not be invalid, but you just don't care. what that specific person has to say. And that's a hard message to teach in school, particularly because that is where game developers more than anybody fall very badly, is that they start getting a little criticism from a nobody YouTuber who has less than 1,000 subscribers, and then all of a sudden they're overreacting and fighting and DMCAing people and making themselves look so bad from Streisand effects, when the nobody YouTuber would have never gotten any attention anyways, and you've definitely highlighted that YouTuber a lot more. There's been a lot of video game critics and YouTubers out there that have become much more popular by criticizing somebody and then getting somebody to backlash against that criticism. Otherwise, although I would say most YouTubers that do get popular because somebody's backlashing against them tend to kind of fizzle out because they're not making good quality product in the first place, and I don't exclude myself from that. Yeah, if, for instance, my criticism of some AAA game was like front page news because a game developer was flipping out over it, I may gain 100, 200, maybe even 500 subscribers, but I don't know if I would gain 500 viewers. Unless there is just something special about my content that I don't recognize, that people would enjoy. Anyways, moving on, we have Goddess of the Card War, which just looks like a Chinese card collection gacha type battle game. It looks not very polished. It's early access, $3.59. Actually, though, even though I say Chinese is not even listed as the top languages. So, take that for whatever you want that to mean.
Nothing but a child.
Next we have Pirates of the Madagascar Island, which just looks like a low polygon survival RPG for $7.59, bunch of languages. Next we have a game called Honor Runs, which looks like it's a dark screenshot top-down twin-stick shooter. Yeah. Not too many dark screenshot twin-stick shooter games out there, but that doesn't improve it in any way. $9.99, English only. Here we have a game called FL Chess, which looks like it is just a 3D chessboard. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like there's enough polish to make sense that this would be the chess game you'd want to play. Although the price is right at $2.39, English only, which that seems weird. You'd think chess in particular would be a great game to specifically subtitle to as many other languages as possible.
This is what love looks like.
Here we have a game called Non-Story Part 1, I guess, which just seems to be some ugly graphics. And they're saying it's an RPG. It's $1.37 English and Russian. If anything, it seems maybe closer to a point-and-click adventure. Here we have Pixel Star Hero, which looks like a top-down twin-stick shooter game of no real interest. $4.99 English only, third-party EULA. Just trying to burn through all these games. Here we have a game called Lost Robot. This looks like an actual game, or at least the beginnings of an actual game. We don't see a ton of games that try to be kid-friendly either, and I'm not sure with this character this is trying to be kid-friendly or not. Let's see, free to play, English full audio. The weird thing here is I can put this on the fall list, that's fine. But I'm not sure what the real point of playing a free-to-play game is, unless this was like a student project, which it doesn't say that. So that does put you in a weird position. Here we have a game called Bunny Ribbit, which just looks like a Game Boy style, like co-op platformer where you're controlling two characters at once. $10.49 is way too expensive for that. English subtitles. Yeah, there's just nothing here. And they're selling it as a tough as nails puzzle platformer with Game Boy graphics, which is just kind of an insane combination too. But yeah, that definitely is not something I'm interested in. Checking this next game just to make sure it's YouTube family friendly. Here we have a game called Celestial Hearts, which is tagged as a JRPG with LGBTQ characters. And yeah, it just kind of looks like an RPG Maker game with maybe one or two romance scenes. I don't even know if there's an 18 plus patch here. $8.49, English only. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any 18 plus patch in existence. It's 12 to 16 hours, which for an RPG, particularly a JRPG, is incredibly short. Let's see, we need one more victory. So yeah, I don't see any reason why Celestial Hearts would make it to the fall list. Here we have a game called Connect, which seems like it's a hex tile twisting game that looks like a cell phone game that they've put a little desktop background image around to make it not look like a cell phone game. Actually, I'm a little surprised that more game developers haven't done something like this, where they've made it try and look like a desktop to convert it. Although maybe this might be a case of the game actually is on a desktop and this isn't a background, this is just the window that you play the game in. Let's see, $2.99. And really it's just the game pipes with hex grids instead of squares. In a weird way, I've never gotten pipes a good pipe game, let alone a variant of a pipe game. It's probably too expensive though to put on the following list, really, at $2.99. Well, it's not eliminated just because of price. I'll put it on the fall list. We'll see if people really love it. I bet it never gets 30 reviews. It's too simplistic. Here we have something called Flaming Million, which is tagged as LGBTQ experimental / political, which just screams to me like it is a low effort troll game, and there's nothing here to change my mind on that. It's free, it's English, only 40 to 60 minutes of gameplay. Honestly, at a certain point I have to wonder if some of these troll games, if they look like troll games and they're free, if they have some kind of viruses on them or something. Which one would hope that Steam is doing a good enough job to stop that from happening. We've never really heard any stories of viruses being allowed or crypto miners being allowed through Steam for any long amount of time, where if there was even one game like that, somebody would have had to have caught it. But then again, maybe people aren't looking. So that might be the reason why nobody's caught it up until this point. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Unheard, which Seems like you're playing as a giant mouse, jumping around and kind of platforming. I'm not 100% sure there's a game. It's a lot of dark screenshot syndrome. It seems like it's a game where you are intentionally always playing in the dark. $6.29, allegedly full audio in every language. 21 levels. I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but I suspect that this is actually not a polished enough game to really be that interesting. 1 damage to an enemy.
This is God's word. And or able to
I didn't hit that.
That was delightful.
Yeah, we have a game called Roll of Hex, which just by the graphics alone we can dismiss it. $7.99 English only. Apparently it's a tower defense roguelite.
You have summoned
Here we have
the
Parallel
purgation.
Shift, which we've seen several games like this where characters are supposed to shift the whole time. Apparently in this case you're supposed to control both characters' color while they're infinitely running, and they seem to just infinitely run and nothing else. $2.39 English only. Yeah, that's just... No, they do jump, but that's it. Otherwise they jump and then they run through portals, and I guess at that point that's when they shift spaces.
How about we have some fun?
Okay.
Dancing in circles and circles. Go.
Shit. That.
My power's waking time to dance.
That.
I'll see you in
Hit
purgatory.
that.
Angels
Hit that.
don't miss.
Here we have one called Jigsaw Pieces Sweet Times. So yeah, still consistently getting Jigsaw games. This one's just $9.99 on top. No DLC shenanigans.
Destroy the garden.
Here we have a game called Dodge Dancer, which, yeah, doesn't look like anything that's visually polished enough for me to be interested in. $1.69 English only. Right.
Perhaps you can bring change.
See. Next we have a game called Rush, which also looks like garbage, for $2.99 English only.
Dark Lord, is that you?
Here we have a game called Avoid. I feel like these are all games being listed by the same person. 59 cents English only. And this is from That Games Guy and Infinite Bridge, so we'll keep an eye out and see if we see more of these. Although there's just a chance.
I am the thunder of war incarnate.
Next we have a game called Across Killzone. I'm starting to yawn. Yeah, my insomnia still is in a weird position. This looks like a Chinese, just asset flip zombie shooter. 59 cents English only, yet we clearly see Asian writing on the display. Yep. But anyways, as I was saying, my insomnia is still fairly weird at the moment, so I am getting fairly tired, and like I woke up at 1 or noon in the afternoon. It's 4 in the evening, and I'm yawning. Some of that may be because I've been talking for 2 or 3 hours, but a lot of that is just straight up just poor quality of sleep. I had to have my air conditioner settings to a way that I normally would not want them set, so getting back to just default settings will probably help. this, this, this. That was dumb. Should know what these cards do before I play them. Like an idiot. I probably did stay up. Yeah, I stayed up till like 3 in the morning though last night recording Danganronpa, so if I went to sleep somewhere around 3, 4, or 5 in the morning and then woke up at 1, that is pretty much only 5 hours of sleep at most versus the 8 to 10 hours they allegedly think you should have. One damage. I kind of have to play this guy, otherwise I can't do anything. So
Stay beautiful. Dream for eternity. Okay, this one's all me. Want to know enduring beauty? Don't get the wrong
do
idea.
that.
Perhaps you can bring
And return. Here we have a game called Vacation Adventures Park Ranger 4. This is clearly just a hidden object game type experience. $4.99, not a terrible price from Casual Arts, English only. It would still be very hard to justify playing any of those games though. Here we have a game called Zoo Cleaner. I can't think of a simulator I'd want to play less than that. And you can pretty well tell it's just an asset flip joke game where you're cleaning up the same style of poo from 3 different animals. 59 cents English and Russian. Okay. I can recover 1 play point. I can do this.
I'll show you something.
misery.
And I can do this, which will do 3 damage.
I'll take my compensation up
Misery.
Oh, that was 5 damage. I could have killed that. Oh, well. That sucks. Here we have a game called Experimental, which looks like it is just an asset flip
So delightful.
platforming first-person shooter game. I guess more first-person shooter. $7.99, bunch of languages. I really didn't curate any of this, did I? Here we have a game called Video Realms, which that doesn't seem like a good name, but some of these visuals look slightly interesting if you're going to tell me that this was just a car combat racing game. I'm not sure I really believe that. Short sci-fi stories for Windows PC is a terrible description. What did that say? Early access, free, English only. I just have no faith in a game by that name. Okay. Let's play this.
Misery.
Put that.
Misery.
And then that. Okay. Let's go ahead and kill that.
Let me
And then do that, I guess. Interesting. He's like hurting himself and then he's healing himself. Here we have a game called Captains and Dungeons, which once again is kind of like a low effort name. The graphics don't look terrible. You told me this was a cell phone port of a game, I'd believe you, from this interface. It's $4.49 English only. Yeah, I just don't think that there's going to be enough of a gameplay or enough polish here though. Because if you're not bothering to get rid of the heads-up display for the PC port, you're probably not going to... There probably isn't much of a game or anything or polish. Let's see. That is activated for me. And we can do that. And then we can hit this.
That was delightful.
Put that on the field.
You know you want this.
See, I might be able just to wear this character down. Like, probably not to the point where he runs out of cards, but enough to the point where I could potentially kill him. I think at 3 hours we'll just call it a day, though. Okay, I can do 7 damage. I can play a ward.
I shall protect you. The night will be stained in blood. Become part of me. Now close your eyes.
So I probably lost there. Yeah. If I could survive one more turn, I could win. But that's often probably the case.
Now, show me what you can do. My reign is supreme.
Yeah. She can take out that character.
Help I lost. You're tough.
Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Meet with Periods RPG. I'm not sure I really like this artistic style for a top-down dungeon crawler twin stick shooter type game. It's positive. It's $29.99, which is pretty expensive. English and Polish. I'm gonna put this on the following list for further investigation. There's some turn-offs for this visual style, but and the color palette in particular. There definitely feels like there's some scenes here where I can't really tell where the main character is or what's going on. Let's see, here we have one called Half Past Fate Romancing Distance, which apparently is a dating sim with some RPG elements, but surprisingly it doesn't look like it was made in RPG Maker, or if it was at the very least done with specific art and not just pre-made art. $4.97 is not that expensive as far as a dating simulator. English only. It seems to be like dating around social distancing, which that is the one thing that I think may lose this game in relevance after a few years, hopefully, if we're not still social distancing. And that certainly could just be something that hamstrings the idea of a game here. I have a slight fear is that this is a game that is telling the story of a romance between, say, the creator of this game and his current significant other, and then it may be more of a love story than more of a love letter than a love story to his significant other, and then who knows, at a certain point they may break up, and then that makes the whole story awkward. Whereas if this is just a full from fiction story, that's more ideal.
Prepare to face judgment.
Yeah, a lot of love letter style games can't put any real drama or conflict in them because they wouldn't want that to happen.
You walked into the wrong forest, friend.
Right. Let's go ahead and play this. And this. And attack. Next we have a game on Steam called Congo, which looks like a cell phone platformer hack and slash game. It's a little dark, but it looks cutesy enough that, like, in its colors it's a little dark. There might be something here. $1.79, English, Russian. I'll give it a chance. Let's see. See. Next we have a game on Steam called Last Kingdom. It looks like kind of a hard combat RPG game. Doesn't look very well drawn. Or I just don't like that art style. English, Chinese only. It looks a little too MS Paint for me. So no to that. Let's see, we've got quite the collection now.
Resign yourself.
And that. Next we have a game on Steam called Boom, which it's a logic puzzle game with a relaxing atmosphere, which is weird that it would be called Boom then. Looking at these screenshots, I have no idea how this is supposed to actually work. It's $1.19, whole bunch of languages. Yeah, it seems like you're just trying to drag and drop things, and these symbols must mean something, but I have no idea what they're supposed to mean. I can put this on the following list, but almost certainly it's not going to make it off the following list, because that seems like it's an illogical logical puzzle, logic puzzle game. Next we have a game with Asian characters and then the letters OL, and this definitely looks like a Chinese something or other. I'm not sure if it's a clicker or if it's a chat software. They're calling it a RPG, free to play, Chinese only. I can't even tell what it is. Banish a random enemy follower. Alright.
There's no escape from the gods.
See, do we want to evolve anything to keep anything alive? If I do evolve anything, then
Resign yourself.
then that would be kind of a waste for this character's ability.
Must I persist?
Next, we have a game on Steam called Dungeon Limbus, which, looks like it's probably a Chinese kind of zoomed in, cutesy, crypto necrodancer type dungeon crawler roguelike. Seems like it definitely is trying to be comedic, and this character in particular looks very different from the way some of these other characters are drawn, so I'm not sure these are unique drawings. $13.49, English, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, so take your pick on who made it. Turn-based roguelike and deck builder. Okay. I could banish somebody. Or I could do this. I can do this. I can just end the turn. Next we have a game called Escape of Pinball, and this feels like another game that misunderstands what the word pinball means. From a Chinese looking developer, $9.99 from a Japanese language support. Interesting. So I was wrong about that, and that one's a Japanese developer who doesn't know what pinball means. Here we have a game that's called After Meeting, which looks like it's might be a puzzle game of some sort, which you're moving and connecting windows.
I will persevere.
Seems almost like it's a match 2 game, but I don't think that's really what it is. See if we can see how this would play. You click on something and then something happens and then it turns the windows off. Interesting. Yeah, this doesn't feel like a real game though. $1.99 English Chinese. It seems like they put a ridiculous description around a non-existent game. Regal Falcon versus this. You can't win just by playing this. So how much is a Regal Falcon? It's a 3-4, which means I do need to just manage that. Interesting. If I can play this, then I could play this to remove one for it and move it forward.
Unmoving shield.
One of the games has already been removed from Steam because I just have a link directly to Steam now.
You've walked into the wrong forest, friend.
Right. 3. If I do this and then do this, that destroys that. Then if I evolve here,
My blade is your salvation.
that does nothing.
And respected.
Here we have a game on Steam called Shattered Ruins, which looks like it is just a VR low effort asset flip experiment. Early access $7.99. English only. Not VR though, surprising.
This is not the end.
Right, well, sadly, I think I'm gonna have to work for that last victory off screen. One more victory is needed. And we have about 10 more games today. And then what I think is going to end up happening more than anything is I'm going to realize that I didn't talk about any games that actually came out over this weekend. And so we'll have a bit of a backlog still probably on Wednesday. But let's just go forward. Here we have Zoo World VR, which going through an animal park and all of that does kind of sound like an interesting idea in VR. Visually though, that's not quite getting to the point I'd like to see it at. $6.99 is also fairly cheap for a VR game. English full audio, which also questionable in that case. Here we have Swiss Alps Jigsaw Puzzles for $2.39, English only, which I don't know if you really want a special collection of just Swiss Alps puzzles. Here we have something called Clip Maker, which is almost certainly just selling some experimental thing you can get off the asset store where you're posing and modeling characters and maybe playing videos in the background. Even as a content creator, I have a real hard time seeing much of use for this. Although, I guess if you were like Valve News Network and you did something like this, it might be slightly interesting to see, but not really. Like, it would be better instead for Tyler McVickerson to simply show up on a face cam than go through all the effort of using software like this. That is kind of like the problem with the VTubers in general, is that it's a lot of work just to have a fake person puppeting a anime character. Next we have a game called Calm Pressure, which looks to me like it's just pipes, which I've yet to see a good pipes game. This might actually be going in a bit different direction because it might actually be making you calculate different pressures on the pipes for different inputs. Interesting idea. Early access $4.99, English only. I'm gonna put this on the fall list for sure. Yeah, that's definitely an idea to take what is a simplistic puzzle game to the next level and say, well, in reality, you would have to consider the pressures under pipes. You can't just put like 10,000 psi under a tiny little copper pipe. It will burst and explode or leak out. And that does evolve the gameplay mechanic too. Here we have Evolution of a Mini World, Physics Wonderland, which just looks like an asset flip thing. $5.99, English only. That's fairly expensive too. Here we have a game called Mythic Zombies, which just looks like a dark screenshot asset flip zombie shooter. Early access $11.69. I'm not seeing anything of impress. I may have actually covered some of these games before and just not been in a position where I could close the tabs. And see, we're about to hit the points where we start covering news again, and I'm fairly certain I've covered all that news before. Here we have a game called Theater of Carnage, which that visual in the trailer looked very interesting, but the actual game is very basic. That part of the problem with this is just the arena size, if nothing else. There's just too many people for that size. Early access $9.99, third-party account. Simple profile registered on ClearDB MySQL on Heroku to access online play. Wow. So basically, from what I'm reading here, is that you have to go to a website to get somebody to run a MySQL database service for you to play online. That is an insanely dumb way to do your business. Here we have a game called Rogueria, Roguelike X Tactics. And this, I think, is probably a nicely polished Chinese game, but it seems like it's kind of more of a mobile game too. Yeah, I don't think there's quite enough here that would make me want to play and ignore the user interface kind of taking up a lot of screen space a lot of times. Early access, $14.49, bunch of languages. I think it's probably Chinese game, so no to that. Here we have a game called Jumping Over It with the Nico Girl, which Nico is Japanese for cat. So this is a platformer where you're playing a cat girl, and I suppose it's named as a parody of Getting Over It with Benet Foddy. Although this gameplay mechanic does not seem to be a game like that. So the whole thing feels like it's a troll game. $1.99 English only. Can't say yes to that. Here we have a game called Gravity's Rubik's Cube, or a bunch of Asian characters. It looks like it is a bullet hell neon mess first person shooter. English is not supported, 99 cents, Chinese only, so no to that. This next game is tagged nudity, so let me double check to make sure everything is mostly YouTube family friendly, or completely YouTube family friendly, I should say that. Yeah, we have this game called Drink Barmaid Regression. See, this came out the 12th, and so this is about the last time I guess we've seen an adult game. Here you have some very large busted characters for an RPG, and you can pretty much tell that the focus is only around the characters and there isn't really a game here of interest. $14.99 English, Japanese, and Chinese. Really, really big busts there. That's one of the cases where the having a preference can potentially color your game in such a way that you are going to end up with such a niche product that it only interests a small selection of people. Most guys like big busts, but not all guys like busts that are so large that they would literally smother you. Freakishly large busts are generally not that desirable. Let's see. Next we have Enter the Backrooms, yet another one of these urban legend games around the backrooms, which I'm glad we haven't seen a ton of these, but we're still seeing the occasional low effort design of one of these. Third party EULA, $2.99 English only. Yeah, ridiculous. Here we have a game called Steel Graves, which looks like it might be, we're calling it a third-person action strategy game in solo and multiplayer. Looks like it's a third-person shooter. I'm really wearing out my voice at this point. Early access, $29.99 English and French. You don't see that combination of languages very often. I guess I'll be really, really generous and put this on the follow list, but it probably doesn't need it. I could probably have just dismissed it. Here we have Trader Life Simulator, which seems just to be an asset flip game. $16.99 English only. Yeah, nothing there. Here we have a game called Block Dungeon, which looks like a block pushing dungeon or a blocky dungeon. Yeah, $2.39 being compared to Rogue Legacy and Isaac, which is kind of ridiculous. English only. 30 types of weapons and uniforms is a fairly small amount. So yeah, he is smashing blocks, which I never once thought that I wanted to smash blocks in a dungeon. We have Warhammer 40k Daka Squadron Flyboys Edition. This is 1779 English full audio. Warhammer 40k series tends to be still pretty bad. It's, if anything, it's probably one of the longest running series to have so many bad games around it. But I'll put this on the fault list just in case. This is a very different style of gameplay for the Warhammer 40k universe anyways. See, next we have a game called Shoot Your Friends, which is just a top-down twin-stick shooter for $4.24, which is too expensive. For that, I have about 5, maybe 10 more tabs. Here we have Zero G Revolution, which looks like it is mostly a ugly-looking puzzle adventure game. For English not supported, but free. Korean only. Yeah, well, since English is not supported, I guess I don't have to consider it any further. But, yeah. I might be one of the very first non-English language supporting VR games we've ever seen. Here we have a visual novel called Dreamcatcher Reflections Volume 1. So it's episodic. What's funny too is we have not really seen a lot of visual novels released lately. And I don't know if there's a good explanation for that one. $3.74 English only. Might just be the Asian countries are on like holidays, or they're just busy doing other things, or maybe Valve is not approving any visual novels at the moment. I don't know why they would do that. Here we have an Asian letter game that looks like it's just an ugly, like they're calling it an RPG puzzle horror game. $3.79 Chinese only. Yeah, it's probably just a horror asset flip. Kind of escape the room experience. Nothing there looks interesting. Doesn't matter, it doesn't support English anyways. Here we have a game called Alt Deus Beyond Chronos, which is tagged as a VR adventure anime game. I'm not really sure what this is, though it seems like it's a little bit of everything. It says it's full of robot battles, pop music, and emotion. And there has been more than their fair share of anime looking things that have been just put in VR. And that's kind of what this feels like. You know, it would be very weird if all the visual novels started being only in VR. Because then that would make it a perfect excuse just not to cover any visual novels ever. $26.99 is way overpriced. English and Japanese full audio. I'm gonna say no to that. Here we have Welcome to the Polyverse, which obviously is just an asset flip first person shooter. Early access for $11.99. English full audio allegedly. Right, so now. We already, I think, talked about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity expansion pass. Imagine we've talked about all of this. We talked about the X-Play stuff. Microsoft revealed the weekend's X-Play free days titles. Which I don't even know if that's really news. I already talked about Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout coming to Xbox. I'm fairly certain we talked about Waifu Surprise coming out for Nutaku. For what little there is to say there. Here we have a game called Space Dance Harmony, which looks like it might actually be a dance game. Not sure how a dance game is really going to work in VR, but it might. Early access. Rise VR. English full audio. In a funny way, you really are just going to be moving your hands and following the instructor. Like, this is single player only. If anything, you're kind of... Yeah, like the whole feet movement and the hip movement are something that either you're going to not do because you're in VR and you don't want to trip over things, or you are going to do and potentially trip over things. I can almost see this. If you got the graphics really, really realistic, some people, particularly during the pandemic, could potentially turn to dancing and hanging out with virtual people. It's like the characters don't have to talk, they don't have to sound realistic, they just have to look fairly realistic while dancing, and you could potentially fall into that delusion. Here we have a game called SSCS, which from the looks of it looks like it's just an asset flip. Indie arcade game with puzzle elements is what they're calling it. See, a game like this could be like Myst, but it doesn't look as good as Myst. And honestly, if a Myst-like game comes out and it doesn't look as good as Myst did originally, then what's the point, or the way you think Myst does? This is English, Chinese, and Russian for $4.49. I talked about Xenoblade Chronicles Pyra, announced for Smash Brothers. Let's see. Apparently YouTube creators is letting creators take over their channel, which that seems kind of crazy. Overall, YouTube's still not really doing anything. We already talked about the Nintendo Direct Zelda announcements. Bungie is scaling up Destiny into additional media and creating new IPs, or plans to create new IPs. Which, okay. Good for Bungie not to stick with what they have already done. Here we have a game called Alien Earth, which just looks like a very old game. Which, in fairness, it is an old game. 1998. $5.99 may be a little too expensive for a game I don't recognize, but I will put this on the fall list just in case there is some kind of cult following for this kind of game. If anything, it's going to create this problem when I do actually do a fall list cleanup, in which I start to realize, oh, there's some very old games here that maybe just came out this year, and that's the reason they don't have any reviews, not particularly because they are bad games or irrelevant games. Of course, that's just a risk I think we'll have to take. Here we have something called Hi Smile Son, which just seems to be a collection of drawings. They're not terrible drawings, but I just don't think there's a game here. They're tagging it as a puzzle visual novel for $1.79. English full audio. And they're comparing this to Broken Sword as a series, and I'm like, nope. Yeah, these comparisons are still pretty bad for new games. I think we already talked about the Saudi investment fund acquiring shares of Activision, Blizzard, Take-Two, and EA. So far, we haven't seen any changes, but we wouldn't for a while as far as the content that's developed by any of those companies. Here we have a game called Hit and Rush, which looks like it's a first-person shooter, and honestly seems like it has a decent enough polish on it that it deserves a follow. Free-to-play online PvP. Well, that eliminates it from me. Then I'm not going to play online PvP games. Third-party EULA. It's also somewhat suspect, but not terrible. We have an instant mobile game platform, Arty, securing $10 million in funding. So it's from February 18th. The Intellivision Amco release date was delayed again. We talked about that. EA completed its acquisition of the Dirt developer Codemasters, which makes me wonder slightly if the Dirt games might get re-released with their audio intact or re-released without their audio intact, but still every game that Codemaster has made in the Dirt series, the Colin McRae series, might get re-released, which that'd probably be helpful for fans of the series instead of what Codemaster was doing, which was mostly removing old games to sell and push new games. Here we have a game called Tower of Portal on Steam, which just looks like a first-person asset flip shooter, just going up a tower. $1.99. Here we have a game called Vladimir 2021. I wonder if this is a political troll game. I would have to assume so. English not supported, 89 cents. Not sure if this is pro or anti Vladimir Putin, and I really don't care. I think we already talked about how Bloober's team's next game aims for more action. Honestly, though, I feel like Bloober team has made 2 or 3 games without action in a row, so that they're long past that point. There's this game which caught my attention, Learn Programming Python, as if they're going to actually have multiple games that are around Learn Programming. But I really don't suspect that this is actually going to be well educational. First of all, it doesn't look like you are either typing in much instead of just clicking on things, and I don't feel like it's particularly holding the hand of players. It's a terminal-based game for learning and practicing how to program in Python, which pretty much I think means that it's probably just Python, which maybe might be against the Python license itself, but probably not to include Python. There's 11 chapters here, which doesn't seem like quite enough. And then here we go. This game is incorrectly flagged by some antivirus systems. Yeah. So I would be very careful around that. But generally it doesn't matter. It just doesn't look like a good game more than anything else. Let's see. Yeah, I'm looking at somebody's Twitter feed, and I don't even remember why I'm looking at someone's Twitter feed. Apparently, Genshin Impact is getting a rather odd crossover with KFC in China. That doesn't actually seem as odd as it might sound on first. And Twisted Metal is getting a TV show headed up by the writers of Deadpool and Zombieland. I'm looking at TechRaptor's Twitter feed. Here we have a game called Alien Life Simulator, which no, that's not enough polygons for me. Early access $19.99, English full audio. Yeah, I just don't think that's a real game. We already talked about Silent Hill being rumored to be in development, a new Silent Hill game being rumored to be in development. Here we have one visual novel, My Dream Sport Dating Simulator, which seems to be probably a Western kind of joke visual novel. Wouldn't it be weird if it turned out that the Japanese have just run out of ideas for visual novels and they stopped making them altogether? This is $9.99, English and Spanish Latin America. So this might be a Spanish Latin America joke visual novel. The game Kill It With Fire is coming to the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, iOS, and Android on March 4th, which is trying to kill a spider. Here we have a game called Buddy Simulator 1984, which by the looks of it doesn't look particularly that good. But it's very positive, so I'm not sure what this is. Horror Retro Story Rich, $8.99, single player English. Guess I have to put it on the follow list until I can investigate that further. Then next game is tagged sexual content, so let me make sure all of the images are mostly family friendly. Well, there's a girl being attacked by a tentacle or vine monster, so we'll not show that. But next we have Fantasy Tavern Sextet Volume 2, which I feel like Volume 1 of this came out fairly recently. It's just fantasy anime girls with lots of cleavage. So yeah, adult content still showing up occasionally. I talked about that. Here we have a game called Woodle Deluxe. We're almost done. Which this actually looks like a new Super Mario Land 3D clone, which we haven't seen any of that before. $3.89, whole bunch of languages. This could definitely be nothing, or it could be something, so I'm gonna have to put it on the follow list and see what people say. It does kind of have the feel of a New Mario Land 3D, or even a bit Kirby-esque visuals to it. Which definitely a lot of the ideas around some of that stuff is generic enough that there should be more clones, and there just aren't. Probably maybe because Nintendo is a looming threat. Here we have something called the Damathos Clan, which looks like it's just an RPG Maker game for $5.39 English only. Nothing particularly interesting there. Here we have a game called Heart of Siam, which I think is an infinite runner. $13.49 is way too expensive. English full audio. Here we have Legend of Mana from Square Enix. That is relevant because I believe Legend of Mana is the sequel to Secret of Mana. $29.99. Of course, the problem still that runs around here is that the remake, or whatever Secret of Mana they have on Steam right now, I don't think is particularly that great. And I'm not sure there's enough relevancy there to justify playing a bad re-release of Secret of Mana than to play the sequel that is much lesser known. Next we have a game called Negative: The Way of the Shinobi. The Way of Shinobi. Like, it just seems like all the art is negative. And then it's a running and platforming, playing as a ninja game. $4.79, English only. Just don't think that there's anything here, really. I think there's a half concept for a gameplay mechanic, and it is barely used at all. I don't think he actually controls the whether he's in light or shadow. There's just no polish on the heads-up display, so yeah, I'm gonna say no to that. This next game is tag nudity, so let me double check. We still are fairly inconsistent as to whether a game wants to say it has nudity or sexual content in it. Here we have, after I met that cat girl, my quest list got too long, which that's probably a euphemism. And you can see it's just an RPG maker with some decent anime characters in the zoomed in scene, but for the most part you're going to have them zoomed out, and you're going to be looking at things like this. This is $11.69 English full audio. So we did have three or four adult games that came out. I think we talked about this, that the Little Nightmare series could be over as the studio focuses on creating new IP. This is an IGN article. Yeah, we definitely talked about that. Here we have a game called Robo Bunnies in Space, which is obviously nothing. $3.19 English only. Almost done. Super Bomberman R is has been rated for PC in Korea. This is different from Super Bomber Girl, but it does kind of highlight an issue where Konami is trying everything and anything to make money now that all the pachinko spaces are closed. Here we have a game called Earth Elements, which looks like a terrible Minecraft clone or Terraria clone. $8.99. Minecraft, by the way, still like putting out some very interesting snapshots at the moment as far as changing how things are going to work. Here we have something called Quickspot Master of the Right Brain announced for Switch. Almost certainly this won't come to the West. It would take too much localization. And then we have like the Famitsu sales numbers. I think we probably already talked about this. I assume you don't really need to buy Super Mario 3D World without Bowser's Fury at this point, since they're bundling the DLC. And there is an argument also to the idea, because Bowser's Fury is this like huge open world connected, directly connected levels, that whatever next Mario game comes out, we may see a huge open world where you just walk under an arch, and that's the thing that indicates you are in a new level, versus coming out of a pipe or loading into a whole new area completely. Although even if they did do that in the next game and it was a giant huge overworld with progressive loading or constant loading of levels that are around them, I feel like very quickly you would have to go back to the bespoke levels for Mario games in particular, because you want different regions and you want to hide areas until you actually reach those areas. And I just don't think that concept really works for what Mario games have ever been. That being said, you probably don't want to go back to something like Super Mario Brothers 3, where you're going to a top level, you're loading into a top level to choose a level, then loading into that level, and then loading out again. You want to get rid of as much loading as possible. But even I mean, the game will just feel too much like Breath of the Wild if they do that. And even Breath of the Wild is fairly different from the other Zelda games. Although I guess you still go into the little temples. Moving on, we have Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruins event set for March 8th. So they're planning on having an event. And then I think a lot of these other tabs were actually just Chrome extensions that I was trying to set up. Which means I am pretty much done at this point. So 3 hours and 30 minutes catches me up. If my Twitter wants to support me very briefly, then I'll have to figure out where I put the Humble Bundle page. There it is. Bundles. Do we have a new Humble Bundle? No, we don't. The Train Sim Expedition Bundle ends in 19 hours. And then on my Twitter feed, what I'm looking for is any What's on Steam notifications at all, because I may have to just go through that later. And we're trying to see if there's any new bits of news this Monday. X-Play is going to have a Black History Month showcase on Wednesday the 24th at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. I believe that will be on Twitch TV/G4TV. There probably does deserve some more highlighting of how a lot of people of color have always been kind of fans of video games, and the new generation even more so, and they've been ignored, and they certainly haven't had a voice in creating games, and their voice has not really been listened to much in the development of games either. Arguably, people of color in general have often been told that they should enjoy a certain thing. You should like BET, you should like what's being offered to you, and you should support it, when often that content is not well designed, well made, or even made by the right people who could catch the attention of people of color. Gamma Sutra has an article here. CD Projekt Red is issuing DMCA takedowns to halt the spread of illegally obtained source code. I don't think that's going to work very well. But I suppose they can't really do anything other than that. Let's see. The Madden 22 cover star may have leaked, which I don't know if I care about that or if anybody cares about that. Let's see. You get a KFC themed glider in China if you buy a themed chicken bucket for Genshin Impact. I kind of have to wonder how popular Genshin Impact is in China, but who knows. Let's see. Talk about that on Wednesday. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot of news has happened. Could be a long day for me. It's not really the kind of day where I should be yawning and sleepy, but yeah, I've got some house cleaning that I'm gonna try and do. Not today, then tomorrow, then or the next G4 TV is highlighting Reggie Fils-Aimé as a as part of Black History Month, which okay, like I guess Reggie Fils-Aimé might be a person of color. I don't think he even works in video games anymore. And frankly, I'm not sure that most people off the top of their head would have assumed that he was a person of color at all. Alright, and so once again, my Twitter feed just doesn't seem like it wants to open that many tweets. So I'm unable to scroll down any further. It just stops. Their dumb database or their servers are just not capable of bringing up data after a certain point because of a glitch, I assume is the case. So I might also work on the router today, but probably not. Alright, well, let's see. Where is my mouse cursor? Yeah, overall, we still need to get one free victory if we can, and then with Shadowverse, and otherwise I just need to keep on playing Danganronpa, which is the plan. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.